Thanks, Pete. I'm super grateful for Pete because we didn't really ever have a name for what I did. And so I was doing all these deals and I was kind of a weirdo. The startup community gets a lot of praise, but there was nothing ever kind of out there for guys that bought businesses and built them up and exited them. So I'm kind of really grateful for Pete because he's created this community that's given me some kind of place to belong, which is important for all of us because it's a lonely place out there when you do what I do and what you guys do. So, you kind of got your wife and that's about it, or your partner and that's it. Because even your mother doesn't understand what you do. So anyway, welcome to the adventure capital of the world. And I thought, what better way to start this conference with a whole lot of adventures and stories about ETA and what we have done. So the 2-minute kind of intro about me is, I think it's important because most of the people I understand are investors in this room. So as an investor, it's really important to understand the background of the jockey that you're potentially going to invest in, because in my experience and all of the kind of VC/angel investing I have done where I've backed a jockey have not gone well. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. Hopefully that will give you some idea of maybe what you're looking for when you're investing in a searcher and an operator. So I grew up in a place called Tikipanga, which only a couple of you will probably know where that is. It's in Whangarei, which is north of Auckland, in the very north end of New Zealand. So kind of the opposite end of town to where we are today. I got beaten up at school. I grew up in a very middle class family, quite poor really. And that was the motivation to make a better life for myself. And I think that's important because what I see is people just really don't want it bad enough. And so what I did, and this is, I don't know, blowing my own trumpet a little bit, but what I did was quite smart. I thought, my dad just worked for the government all his life, wasn't very rich. And so I figured out, where are all the rich people? So in the 80s, there was a stock market boom, and all you had to do was write away to the company secretary of a listed company, and they would send you this beautiful, glossy annual report. And all I did was look in the back of it and look at all the directors, and all of the directors were basically accountants and they played golf. So I thought, well, I'll become an accountant, and I better learn to play golf. So at 13 years old, I got a couple of clubs and started to play golf. And I got to talk to all these business people. And in fact, interesting story, the most famous of them is not far from here, and that was Michael Hill. So Michael Hill started in Whangarei his chain of jewellery stores. I once found he'd lost his keys. He had a Merc. He had the best car in the car park at the golf course. He had a big, beautiful Mercedes. He lost his keys. I found them. He gave me $50. I mean, seriously, $50 in the 80s was like a fortune. I used to caddy for a lot of these business guys to try and hear their talk and learn about their business and whatnot. And I got paid $5 for like 4.5 hours. So you can see that hourly rate was pretty low. But anyway, that was my background. And that hopefully gives you some insight into the competitive nature of kind of who I was as a person and the background I was coming from and where I wanted to get out of. So to my point about this, most people are prepared to do a little bit of hard work. They're prepared to do a little bit of sacrifice, and they're prepared to go through a bit of pain, but generally people are not prepared to take the risk that it takes to do what we do. And there's no better reminder of this when you come to Queenstown and you go out to Arrowtown, and I do this every single time I come to Queenstown, is I go and visit the Chinese gold miners' huts. And that is seriously sobering. These men left their home in China in a pretty tropical kind of climate, like 28, 30 type degrees, to live in these horrible stone huts in search of their fortune. And it is a wonderful kind of grounding for us as business people that are driven to do well in life, to do better for ourselves and do well for our families, to see what these men endured to create their fortune and a better future for their family. Very humbling. And I think if you can find searchers and operators that have that much determination, essentially, if somebody had a gun pointed at your child's head, assuming they're not a 2-year-old, but, at your child's head, how hard are you going to fight and how hard are you going to work to make your dreams come true? So let's go do some deals. I'm going to just run through half a dozen deals just to give you a bit of a flavour of the things that we've done. Hopefully it will inspire some searchers in the room. It will inspire operators roughly on what we have done and what we look for. And also for the investors, it will show you some cool stuff that we've managed to do. So the first business we did was, I'm an accountant, I'm a chartered accountant, went to university. I worked for Arthur Andersen, pre-Enron obviously. I did 2 years of audit and 2 years of corporate finance. In corporate finance, I was buy side, sell side, and the first business that I sold that was so basic and boring was kind of the catalyst for me to leave the corporate world. Now, this business was based in Lower Hutt in Wellington. The guy imported 1-metre-long rolls of sticky tape. So I was acting for Sellotape, the big multinational that was buying it. This business made $1 million, and they were buying it for $5 million. Pretty easy kind of deal. I could not believe all this guy did was import rolls of 1-metre-long sticky tape. He had a guillotine that cut it into 10, 15, or 20 mil widths, made $1 million a year. I was like, fuck, I'm out of here. So, that was just mind-blowing. So I quit my job. Now, I was very fortunate. One of the biggest challenges that people kind of, with my background, is what the hell do you buy? I could have bought anything, and that is the problem. But my wife was an optometrist. So that made it super easy. She was very technical in one thing, and so that made our choice narrow right down to one type of business. The first business we bought was an optometry practice, making 100 grand. We had no money. I think I had $10,000 saved up. That went in legal fees, so I started business on day one with zero. We funded the acquisition, so it was making 100 grand. Really great ETA story, actually. The guy that we bought off, this optometrist in Wellington, had spent 5 years to get his startup from nothing to 100K earnings. So we bought this business. It cost us 180 grand. We funded it 100% from a company called Medical Assurance, which funds medical practices. Generally, medical businesses never go out of business, so we got 100% finance. Good move. And we were what you call a motivated owner. We were 25 at the time, and we knew nothing. Except Michelle did know how to do her job, which is, kind of handy. And we took that business first year. So the masterstroke in buying this business was the New Zealand government announced that every single person in New Zealand had to update their driver's license to a little plastic card, and they had to have an eye test. The entire country had to go and have an eye test within 12 months. Boom. So first year, 100 grand profit, went to 350, right? So we bought a business first before any properties. We were still renting. We were kind of living like students. And second year, 700. Okay, so now I'm like, shit, this is a lot of money. Like every month we were buying a property, an investment property every single month. So second year we bought 13 investment properties. Every month we made a deposit. So you probably couldn't do that today, but this is a few years ago, obviously. So we started that in 99. And it was and I just kept buying more of these businesses because I understood the math, bought more businesses until we had kind of a bit of a chain. And we were the largest independently owned group of optometry practices in New Zealand. Kind of cool. I made a lot of mistakes. In fact, the worst mistake I made was we bought a business on Monday with 5 staff. By Friday, I had 1. You know, I knew nothing. The best line I ever got fed was, if this building was burning down and you were in it, I wouldn't care less. So like, well, shit, well, you better just like fucking give me the keys and leave. So, and then, you know, you have a 90-day wait period before they can lodge a PG against you. So I'm literally, you know how you do when you're waiting to go on holiday and you're counting down the days? I'm counting down the 90 days until this PG kind of goes away. Well, I kid you not, it was the 89th day and I got the letter from the lawyer. So anyway, you know, you're walking down Lambton Quay with a checkbook in one pocket, a really pissed off wife on the other side and your lawyer on the other side, off to mediation to sort it out. And, you know, that's what happens. But we knew nothing, we learned a lot, we learned fast, and it was a great start to my business career. Now, I didn't mention that I married a woman with very high expectations, and that is a good key to success if you want some life advice. She said to me, Phil, I only want to work hard for 5 years and I want to retire and start a family. I'm like, well, 5 years is not long, but I get the family bit. But so we were on a time schedule. So what we did, and now, like, a lot of business is luck, right? So what happened in our industry was it was deregulated. So up to that point, you had to be an optometrist to own an optometry practice. But then the government deregulated it, so now we could sell our business to every man and his dog. Good thing, right? So we got a partner on board, we grew a few more practices, so we had quite a large group at this time, so over 12 practices. And Specsavers were coming to town. So Specsavers were coming to New Zealand and Australia, and OPSM was doing this massive land grab. They needed to acquire as much market share as they could before Specsavers came to town and rattled their cage. So we sold out to the listed company OPSM at 30 years old, and that was the beginning to kind of our business career. We had learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes. We had now some capital, so I didn't need to, that was our equity raising, was that experience. We learned a lot, we raised money, and that led us into the second adventure. So the second adventure came about from problems and challenges I faced in having the group of optometry practices. We had no payroll system, we had no HR system, we had no hiring and firing system, we had none of that kind of HR stuff. Literally, the IRD at the start of the financial year gave you a table and said if you're earning $500 a week, then you'd go down the line and you pay $120 tax. And you know, it was kind of a ruler, X and Y axis. It was super basic but complicated. As soon as student loans kicked in, court fines and all these other things, really challenging. So what I did here, I had met a guy we were still in Wellington at the time. He had a little software company providing accounting software where you used to put your chart of accounts code on your check when you paid your bills, and the bank scanned that check when you got your bank statements. It's like pre-Xero, obviously, pre-MYOB, or similar to MYOB, and it coded your P&L and your GST return for you. So I joined him, and then what we did was we said, look, there's no payroll solution out there. So this is now 2004, and we started Smart Payroll together. Now, so it's 2004. It wasn't even called the cloud, wasn't even called SaaS. Like, none of this stuff existed. And one of the great things about being early is that you get first mover advantage, obviously, but you also have this horrible bleeding edge where you have to educate effectively the world on what you do. And so we found a solution at a big company called Datacom, which is a massive IT company across New Zealand and Australia. And they had cobbled together bits of technology. They had already been doing payroll software. They had already written the internet banking suite for CBA and ASB. And they had been doing the teachers' payroll in New Zealand, which was like a 50,000 person payroll. So they knew kind of all the stuff. But they were an enterprise government department type organisation. They knew nothing about small business. So my partner and I licensed this technology. Now, I just emphasize the word licensed because it'll come up later, slight issue, but we could not have built that piece of software for, I don't know, less than $20, $30 million. So it was an easy road to market. This is 2 years before Xero. Rod Jury was actually one of our first 10 customers. We were quite good friends in those early days, and he used to say, you know, Phil, I love what you're doing here. This is amazing. Have you ever thought of doing accounting software? And he was still at Aftermail at this time, locked in that trade. But it was fascinating to talk with him and see his vision. And I said, look, seriously, we're just going to go an inch wide, a mile deep on payroll and just focus on payroll only, because that was a big enough beast in its own right. And it is very easy to get distracted, you know, like going wider, we could do this, we could do that. But at that point, we just did payroll. Now, it took us 4 years to break even. You know, SaaS is difficult to get started. We had the funding of the small kind of accounting software product, but Smart Payroll did take a while to get going. We would turn up to do demos. People would say, now, son, tell me about the internet. Like, this is early, right? Like, we're doing plug-in, squeaky internet, right? Like, it is scary doing those kind of demos. Obviously, we grew it. It seems obvious now, but we did a lot of strategic partnerships with accountants, of course. You know, back then that was actually kind of original. Now it's like a no-brainer. We did a lot of verticals, so we did things like we would go to mechanics, and we would just stay on mechanics until we had like 50% of the mechanics in the entire country using our product, and then we would move on to another vertical. But we wanted to own that. We'd get testimonials, and then it would kind of spread like wildfire. Now, one of the brilliant things about this was the IRD was so keen, because every single month they would literally get an envelope with all of the data on it that had to be rekeyed. So they said, we will give you a subsidy if you can get businesses to use this product. So we got paid by the government, we got paid by the customer for using our service, and at the end of this, when I exited, we were doing $1 billion a month of gross payroll. So that means we were holding a float of PAYG and PAYE of close to 300 million a month in our trust account. Now, when the interest rate is around 5%, that's a lot of money. And the GP on that is 100. So if you want to, you know, I can see you're kind of like stunned there. That's a big number. That's a big number. That business grew, so I owned it for 16 years. Every single month, like this is the feeling. So on the first of the month, you wake up and you go, I know I'm going to make more than I made last month. Then next month, it's the first of the month, wake up, you say to yourself, I'm going to make more than I made last month. Now you do that 200 times. Now you really have a business. You have a machine. Like the operating leverage in a SaaS company is insane. Like the net margin pre-tax is like 75 to 80%. Like it's almost illegal. And we weren't charging high prices, you know, like in all my businesses, I've always prided myself. This is kind of my dad's influence on me, because he was a poor man and he always used to think that business owners were, because they had a boat and a fancy car, that they must be ripping somebody off. So I've always had to justify myself to my dad to say that, Dad, look, we are not overcharging. We're not the cheapest. We're not the most expensive. We're nicely in the middle. And he said, okay, son, make sure you pay your people really well. And we've always done that as well. I'm always paying my team members a really, really high above market salary. One, so they don't leave, but so that they know that they're valued. And that is another key to success. Now, at some point, this business became so successful that Datacom wanted it back. And unfortunately, I because of that license arrangement, I had to exit that company. And while I obviously got paid a lot of money, the 300K investment that I put into this, we got about 150x on. So you will know that that's a reasonably large number. That was in capital gain and profits along the way. And it was, I'm sure that when we exited that, I knew I won the battle, but deep in my heart, I knew I'd lost the war. And today that business has gone on. So when I exited, we had around 80 to 100 staff. It's now doubled. And through COVID, things like these types of businesses, so we exited in 2020, businesses like this have just gone from strength to strength. So that's my biggest kind of success story. Not very sexy, totally compulsory, regulated, has to be done. Incredibly powerful business model and a wonderful, wonderful thing to invest in if you're an investor, if you can get your hands on something like this. Now the next business story, so the next adventure, this is a bit more left field. So because I've got ADD and I get bored quickly, I think 5 years into that journey of smart payroll, I wanted to learn all about doing business offshore. I'd done quite well in New Zealand, and it was all about the BRIC countries at that time. So this is 2008. So this is actually what I call my Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week story. I only work 4 hours a week in this business. It's also kind of my Big Short story, and it's the story of how I became the king of butter chicken. And people always remember this story more than any other story, so, and I'm sure you'll be the same. I was fascinated with Brazil, India and China. I wanted to do business with one of these BRIC countries because they were the new big thing. And I didn't know anything about China, didn't speak the language. Brazil was too far away and I heard it was a little bit dangerous. So we went with India. Well, and then I go to myself, what do I love about India? I love the food. And butter chicken is New Zealand's most popular takeaway. So I'm like, right. So my wife and I, we bought a little business in this space, supplying Indians in New Zealand with their local food. But my thesis was obviously to take this butter chicken, basically make, increase the TAM from just the Indian population to all Kiwis. And that was what I set out to do. So we got on our kitchen bench top. I went to my local Indian restaurant. I paid him $50 for his recipe. And I started basically making this recipe more unhealthy. We would put more cream in it and more sugar in it and got it to perfect food court quality butter chicken, which is what everyone loves. So, I think one of the other successes in our story has always been our ability to think and act like our customers. When you think and act like your customer, this whole kind of consumer psychology stuff, you will never go broke. If you charge a fair price and you give the service and the product that customers want, it's a no-brainer, right? You'll never go broke. And I think that's been one thing we have been good at. So that's how we got started in the butter chicken business. The $1 million day was the day that Woolies signed us up, and we got all of these products on the shelves of the major supermarket chains throughout New Zealand. So this is a microwave rice product. It's 2 minutes, put it in the microwave, and it had a butter chicken sauce. And you can see us there between Uncle Ben's and Sunrise, the two big players in this space. And but I didn't really like dealing with the supermarkets. So FMCG is particularly hard. The wonderful thing about food is that, man, you guys eat a lot. And it is like, we were selling of just butter chicken alone, so just the one packet in that picture, 50,000 meals a week of this butter chicken rice meal. Because one of the great things with a recession like the GFC provided was that people became more price conscious, they bought cheaper food, and it was, kind of the cost of living crisis pushed people to buy this cheaper stuff. Now, when Lehman Brothers went broke in 2008, it was right at the time that we were buying this business. So it was really uncertain times. It was much like we are right now, today. Like, it was really weird. The world was in a weird place. And not long after we bought it, the cross rate with the NZD went from 80 cents down to 45. Now, I went from making money to losing hundreds and hundreds of thousands a month. And it was probably... when I used to tell the story, I used to say it was my worst time in my business career. Well, I've since had some others, but it was one of the worst times in my business career. And I remember one morning I was having a shave, looking in the mirror, and I literally burst into tears. Because the challenge in business, when you have no hope, is that you start to really despair. And nobody sends you a text message or an email saying, Phil, you're having a breakdown. And I was pretty stressed. I didn't know how I was going to get out of this problem because the problem was essentially bigger than I could cope with because they were out of my control. Luckily, it was a bit of the great thing about food, like if I had bought a desk and chair business in the GFC, no one would have ever bought that stuff. But the great thing about food is that we could sell it at any price just to keep the lights on, just keep the company going, and we got through that GFC. It was a bit of a dead cat bounce, and the exchange rate, the cross rate came back up, and we were back off to the races. Now, the supermarkets weren't that fun, so I decided I'd achieved my goal. This business, now this is, for searchers, this is a really good example. This business was making 200 grand profit. I bought it on 2 times and plus stock. So it cost me around 600 grand. By the time I was getting ready to exit this, I had the profit to $1 million now. You've got to remember I only worked 4 hours a week in this thing, so didn't do much. And I'd achieved my goal of basically playing in this FMCG game. I didn't want to deal with the supermarkets anymore because they're not nice. And it's, I just, I'd done my thing. So because the GFC had created a lot of stress for business owners, there were no good businesses on the market. So we put a high price on this. So I bought it on a 2 times, sold it on a 4 times. I'd increased the profit 5 times. You can see how this is how you make money. This is how you create value. And it was a wonderful exit story. I listed it on Tuesday. It was sold by Friday. Like seriously, at full asking price. So not unconditional, but we had a deal on the table within 4 days. Incredible. So this is what we call the butter chicken mansion. This is what I bought for my children so they could make sandcastles in the sand in front of the property. And the reason I show this to you is that the people that bought that butter chicken business off me had this wonderful commercial property. A big, like $5 million or $6 million commercial property, and they were only making like a 4% yield on it. And they got really sucked into this idea of making $1 million. Now they stuffed up, I'm sad to say, they completely stuffed up my business. You can no longer find my product on the shelves of the supermarkets. And they had sold a really good, safe, big commercial property and bought a risky asset like a business. So you do need, and I bought that beach house that went up in value. So, you have to be up for the game, right? Like business is risky. It is not lay down misère. It is not an easy game. And one of the reasons why I have always, the problem with that business was that we had customer concentration, right? Like when you're kind of at the mercy of the supermarkets, it's quite nerve-wracking. And I've always been good at going, we've created value, we need to maintain this value, we need to get out fast. And that's what we did. So just wanted to share that story about how the person that acquired that business actually went broke. Now, if you don't get any value out of today, I hope that the next slide will be at least something. So if you get your phones ready, I've got something for you to take a photo of. And it is my butter chicken recipe. So take a photo of that. That is an all-time classic. Okay, so at the same time I started the butter chicken business, I also started doing a roll-up of accounting practices. So being an accountant, the thing I love about accountants is they are the gatekeeper to every single small business in the country. And to me that was just like, wow, let's go. How much stuff can I literally sell these people? And so we started buying accounting practices. Now, what I had learnt from our optometry days, we had a lot of trouble in optometry with the specific skills of an optometrist and finding them and all that kind of stuff. So the master stroke with this one, so if any of you guys are doing roll-ups in technical fields, we only bought 50% of each practice we bought. I ended up buying 16 accounting practices, and we created a group called the Smart Business Centre, and not much else to say about accounting. It's a pretty boring field. It's mandated, it's regulated, it is wonderful, wonderful cash flow. You're never going to sell it for a massive price. Anyone that's tried to do a roll-up and list accounting practices or legal practices generally has not done that well. And in fact, I got bored with it pretty quick. But we held this business for 12 years. It was a great cash flow generator. And it was, during that time, the multiple expansion kind of doubled. So I was buying these businesses for 50 cents on the dollar. By the time I exited, we were selling them for 100 cents in the dollar on the fee base. And yeah, not much else to say about that. But I know roll-ups are interesting to a lot of you. And the point around keeping the JV partner locked in and just making sure, like, I have seen people recover from cancer very, very fast. And when you buy a business from somebody that's got cancer and then 2 months later they are pinching all your clients or their clients back, it's not fun. So, you know, you need to have 2-year retentions. You don't want to pay them all out on day one. You know, there's a lot of tactics you need to use in the accounting space. Okay, so the next adventure. Now, this is my gift from God. Now, if you play along in the game of business enough, hopefully at some point you'll get a gift from God. Now, when you read the papers and stuff and you see in America people selling for multiples that are just like crazy numbers, you think, man, why can't I get that? Now, we all know that there is a multiple arbitrage between New Zealand and Australia. There's more multiple arbitrage between Australia and Asia, and then Asia into America. So once you understand that, there is some easy money to be made. So in 2020, I got, so we're full on COVID, the world's going to end, everyone's freaked out. I found a SaaS company for sale, headquartered in Auckland. I was living in, so I moved to Australia in 2014 and took Smart Payroll to Australia. And I couldn't even get back to New Zealand, even with a Kiwi passport. I wasn't even allowed in my own country, which is kind of an issue I still have. But we found the SaaS company for sale for 3 times, 1 times ARR, 3 times EBIT. Like, unreal deal, right? And it was a couple of old guys, 65, their partnership had run its course. They'd been in business together 35 years. And I just knew that whatever I did with this thing, I could sell this somewhere else in the world for a lot more than I paid for it. And all I did, so I bought it sight unseen. I couldn't even get to New Zealand. So I just did the DD kind of online, just trusted the guys. In fact, it was over a year before I got back to New Zealand from Gold Coast to even meet the people of this business that I'd even bought, which just shows the power of how a SaaS company works. There were 13 odd staff, so it was fully managed. Great little business. This business was in 15 countries around the world and provided practice management software for veterinarians in 15 countries, like I say. It had a lot of tech debt. The technology was old, needed a lot of investment. I thought I was up for it, but in fact I wasn't. So in 2021, when the world was like out of COVID and champagne was just flowing everywhere, the phone started ringing. And as you all know, during COVID, pet technology and everything to do with pet just went mental. And I got calls from dudes, and I was like, from big private equity firms in the US, going, we like the look of what you do, we'd like to buy it. How does 10 times revenue sound? And I'm like, whoa, I have like never had a lotto win like this in my life. And so I'm trying to do this deal. And with these fancy private equity guys in the US, they ring me up a month later and go, Phil, we need to reprice this. 10 times is a bit rich. How does 8 times revenue sound? I'm like stamping my fist on the table going, no way. Inside I'm like, yes. And I mean, I'd only owned this thing for like just over a year, right? And unfortunately, towards the end of 21, you know, the valuations were super frothy. But we got to Christmas 21 and we still hadn't done a deal. And by January 22, the markets were starting to crash. Valuations around the world were, the champagne stopped flowing. The stock market was crashing, rah, rah, rah. And then they said, Phil, we can only do 5 times revenue now. And I'm still like loving it all day long, right? About by March, they said, we're out, no deal. So I'm like, okay, we're done here. By about June, July, phones started ringing again, and they were back in the game. And this time, I knew that I had to run a proper process. So I hired a big fancy investment bank in America. They had 200 acquirers on their list of pet tech companies. We ended up selling it to Constellation Software and the Australian subsidiary, Jonas, and we did a nice deal. I made some good money. You know, I think it was like 3x in 20 months. So, you know, put your IRR over that. But if you're in the game enough and you kind of are active, there are wonderful deals that can be had. Now, the next story is not a fully ETA story, but I think it's a wonderful business story that for operators and searchers, for you guys to actually make some money if you don't have a lot of capital. So this is my son, 11 years old, pitching his business idea to 1,500 people at the Gold Coast in an Amazon conference. In the next 5 minutes, he gets pledged $900,000 to invest in his idea. Now, he can only take 15,000 because of regs and everything. We had no paperwork. It was just kind of a kid on a stage. And we came up with this idea of creating these unbreakable glasses. So Sam had bought Michelle and I a G&T by the pool, broke the glass, and we're like, this is a problem, right? We need some really good-looking, unbreakable glasses. And as you know, back it up. As a parent who loves business, teaching your children about business is just like one of the greatest opportunities in life. And so this was the 21st century version of a lemonade stand. It's like, why do a lemonade stand when you can sell to all of the US? And in fact, you can sell to the entire globe. So we went off on this Amazon journey. We went to China, we went to suppliers, we went to warehouses, and when you literally turn up, and that is the key, what is on their website is not what they sell. They will literally take you to the back room, open up this Aladdin's cave of opportunity and products, because they don't know whether you're a competitor or who you are. But when they check you out and they know who you are, man, and we just saw all of these products and opportunities for us to sell on Amazon. So we're in 2021. E-commerce has gone mental through COVID because it was the only thing open. Sam had done this little spreadsheet and he said, Dad, if I can just sell 25 sets of these glasses per day, I will make $250,000 profit per annum. And in fact, in 21, he was getting close to those numbers. After 6 months, we were right on target for this 250K of profit. Like the kid's only 15, right? Like ridiculous. Then private equity starts ringing. And there was massive attention in the e-commerce space. And this fancy guy from Sydney, Harvard, Oxford guy, rings up Sam, says, I really love your business. I want to buy your business, Sam. How does $500,000 sound? Now, in early e-commerce times, 1 times was about standard for an e-com business. So to get 2 times was kind of cool. 500 grand for a 15-year-old kid is like ridiculous. So Sam says, I'll have a think about it. Next time the Zoom pops up, got this fancy PE guy from Sydney. Sam's sitting there. I'm behind him so he doesn't say anything stupid. They go, what did you think of our offer, Sam? Sam goes, this is his opening line. He doesn't talk about the weather, the footy, nothing. He says, I have a few issues with your valuation. And this is a 15-year-old to a PE guy in Sydney. Fuck, I was like laughing on the floor, right, behind him. Just ridiculous, so funny. Anyway, the guy says, how does 600 sound? Sam says, I'll have a think about it. So a few weeks later, Zoom call starts up again. Sam says to the guy, I want $1 million. And the guy thought about it and then said, done. So Sam sold this, we only had 6 months numbers at that run rate, right? Like, he sold his business for $1 million with a 2-year earnout. He made another 150K on the back end of the earnout as well. So the point of that is that if you're a searcher or an operator that hasn't got a lot of capital yet, there are lots of ways that you can make money without having to do a traditional search. So we live in a fast-paced world now. This is not the era of the yellow pages. This is the era of TikTok Shop. So I wanted to show you that story because if a 15-year-old could do it, then you can do it. So there he is in the paper. This story obviously went global, got a lot of attention. There's a picture of the cups. Amazing, amazing story. So I just want to wrap up now. So this is kind of what I did. It's been an absolute adventure for me. Whatever you do is the way that you do it. And I just want to encourage you to, entrepreneurs are disruptors. And entrepreneurs, what we do matters. You know, we are important to the community. We are important to capitalism. We are important to employment. We are a vital piece of the economy. So, yeah, I just want to encourage you to, you know, you owe it to your family, you owe it to yourself to make a difference out there in this world. And good luck. Cheers.